For Hazel Reed, hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. Each day was a frantic battle fought on two fronts, one against the relentless tide of bills for her younger brother's care, and the other against the bone-deep exhaustion that threatened to swallow her whole. Her world had shrunk to the sticky countertops and stale coffee scent of the Bluebird diner. So when the quiet, impeccably dressed man in the corner booth, a man who radiated a power she couldn't possibly comprehend, asked her what she wanted most in the world, her answer was a bitter joke born of desperation. A single day off. She never imagined that this throwaway line would be the trigger, the single pull on a thread that would unravel her entire reality, beginning with the arrival of a sleek, black card the very next morning. The alarm didn't so much wake Hazel as it clawed her from a shallow, restless sleep. 5:15 a.m. The digital red numbers glowed with malevolent cheer in the pre-dawn gloom of her tiny apartment. Outside, the sounds of Queens were already stirring, the distant rumble of the subway, the groan of a garbage truck. For a moment, Hazel Reed allowed herself the fantasy of pulling the thin blanket over her head and sinking back into oblivion. Just 5 more minutes. But 5 minutes was a luxury she hadn't been able to afford in 3 years. Every second she wasn't moving was a second she wasn't earning. With a groan that seemed to emanate from her very bones, she swung her legs over the side of the bed. The floor was cold. Her body ached with a familiar, persistent thrum of fatigue. A double shift yesterday, followed by 3 hours of poring over medical insurance forms that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. The denial letter sat on her small kitchen counter, a crisp white monument to her latest failure. Coverage for experimental treatment protocols is not authorized under your current plan. Experimental? They called it experimental. For her brother, Leo, it was called a chance. Okay, Leo, she whispered to the empty room, a ritual she performed every morning. Time to make the donuts. Her routine was a study in grim efficiency, a lukewarm shower that lasted exactly 4 minutes. Pulling on her work uniform, a pale blue polyester dress that was perpetually 1 size too tight in the shoulders and smelled faintly of grease, no matter how many times she washed it. She skipped breakfast, opting for the bitter, burnt coffee she'd brew for herself at the diner. Food was another line item on a budget stretched thinner than a spider's thread. The bus ride to the Bluebird diner was a blur of hazy streetlights and the faces of other tired commuters, each lost in their own world of quiet struggle. Hazel leaned her head against the vibrating window, watching the city wake up. She used to love this city. She'd come here with dreams of studying art history at Columbia, of spending her days in the hallowed halls of the Met, decoding the stories hidden in canvas and marble. But that was a different life. A life before her parents' accident, before Leo's diagnosis, before the world had tilted on its axis and left her clinging to the edge. Now, art was a memory, and her life was a repeating loop of order pads, coffee pots and the clatter of cutlery. The Bluebird was exactly as she'd left it 12 hours earlier. Sal, the owner, a stout man with a permanent scowl etched into his face and a surprisingly kind heart, was already behind the counter, wrestling with a new espresso machine. "Morning, Sal," Hazel said, tying her apron. "Machine's on the fritz again," he grunted, not looking up. "Called the guy. He'll be here Tuesday. Until then it's swill or nothing." "Swell," Hazel muttered, grabbing a pot of the coffee he'd just called swill. It was thick enough to stand a spoon in. Perfect. The morning rush was a controlled chaos she knew how to navigate. She moved through the narrow aisles with a practiced grace, balancing plates, refilling coffees, taking orders with a mechanical smile. She was a ghost, a functioning part of the diner's machinery, She saw the customers, but she didn't see them. They were eggs over easy, side of bacon, wheat toast no butter. Transactions. Until him. He came in around 10:30 a.m. after the main rush had subsided. The bell above the door chimed, and a hush seemed to fall over the diner. He wasn't dressed like their usual clientele. No work boots or rumpled suits. He wore a simple, dark grey cashmere sweater and tailored charcoal trousers that probably cost more than her monthly rent. He didn't look flashy, but the quiet confidence he exuded was more commanding than any logo or brand name. He had sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, and a stillness about him that was unsettling in the constant motion of the diner. He chose the corner booth, the one with the torn vinyl seat that Sal kept meaning to fix. He didn't look at the menu. He just watched. Hazel felt his gaze on her as she cleaned a nearby table, a prickling on the back of her neck. It wasn't lecherous or judgmental. It was analytical, like she was a specimen under a microscope. She steeled herself, grabbed her notepad, and walked over. "Morning. Can I get you started with some coffee?" "Please," he said. His voice was a low, smooth baritone. "Black." She poured the coffee, her hand steady despite the sudden awareness of her chipped nail polish. He thanked her, and his eyes met hers for a moment. They were a startling shade of blue, deep and clear. She felt an odd jolt, a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Recognition? No, that was impossible. She would have remembered a face like that. He sat for nearly 2 hours. He drank 3 cups of coffee and just watched. He watched Sal argue with the bread delivery guy. He watched Piper, the other waitress, flirt with the college students in booth 4. And he watched Hazel. He watched her patiently explain the specials to an elderly woman who couldn't read the board. He watched her deftly handle a complaint about a cold steak, her voice calm and professional. He watched the way her shoulders slumped ever so slightly when she thought no one was looking. Finally, as the lunchtime crowd began to trickle in, he motioned for the check. Hazel scribbled it down and placed it on his table. "Thank you," he said, placing a few bills on the check. It was more than enough. "You're very efficient." "I try to be," she said, her standard, non-committal reply. He paused, his fingers resting on the edge of the table. He looked at her again, that intense, analytical gaze returning. "Tell me something, if you don't mind me asking." "Sir? You work hard, harder than anyone else in here. I've been watching." His statement was a matter-of-fact observation, not a compliment. "So I'm curious. What is it that you want most in the world? If you could have absolutely anything, what would it be?" The question was so unexpected, so bizarrely intimate, that it threw her completely off balance. For a split second, the floodgates of her true desires threatened to burst open. "I want my brother to be healthy. I want to sleep for a week. I want to not feel this suffocating panic every time the phone rings. I want my old life back. But you don't say those things to a stranger in a diner. It was too raw, too real." So she did what she always did. She deflected with a joke, a little piece of armor to hide the broken parts underneath. She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Honestly, right now, I'd kill for a day off. Just one. 24 hours where no one needs anything from me. The phone doesn't ring, and I don't have to smile when I don't feel like it." She expected him to chuckle, to nod, to say something like, "I hear that," and leave. He didn't. His expression didn't change. The piercing blue eyes held hers, and it felt like he was seeing straight through her flimsy joke to the desperate truth beneath. A strange, unreadable emotion flickered in their depths. "A day off," he repeated softly, as if tasting the words. "Thank you for your honesty, Hazel." He knew her name. It was on her name tag, of course, but the way he said it felt personal. He stood, gave a slight nod, and walked out of the diner. The bell chimed, and he was gone, leaving behind a generous tip and a deeply unsettled waitress. Hazel shook her head, dismissing the encounter as one of the many weird things that happen when you work with the public. Just another strange man with a strange question. She pocketed the tip, her mind already moving on to the table of 4 construction workers who had just sat down, all wanting the meatloaf special. She worked through the lunch rush, then the dinner rush. She went home, her feet throbbing, her head pounding. She ate a bowl of cereal for dinner, paid 1 bill online with the tips she'd made, and fell into bed. The strange man and his question, completely forgotten, buried under the crushing weight of another day, survived. She had no idea that her life had already been irrevocably altered. The next morning was coming, and with it, a small black rectangle that would change everything. The knock on her door came at 7 a.m. It was sharp and authoritative, a sound utterly alien to the usual muted shuffles and distant arguments of her apartment building. Hazel's first thought was the landlord. She was 2 weeks late on rent, a fact that sat like a stone in her stomach. She'd been planning to beg him for an extension later today. She pulled on a faded robe, her heart thumping against her ribs. Peeking through the peephole, she saw not her portly, disgruntled landlord, but a man in a suit so perfectly tailored it looked like it had been molded to his body. He was thin, with severe, swept-back grey hair and a look of detached impatience. He held a sleek, black portfolio case. This was worse than the landlord. This was a debt collector. Or a lawyer, the insurance company. Her mind raced through a Rolodex of financial horrors. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door a crack, keeping the security chain latched. "Can I help you?" The man's eyes flicked over her, a flicker of faint disdain in his expression. "Hazel Reed?" he asked, his voice crisp and British. "Yes?" "My name is Jeffrey. I am the executive assistant to Mr. Conrad Dalton. He asked me to deliver this to you personally." He slid a flat black envelope through the crack in the door. It was made of heavy, textured cardstock that felt impossibly luxurious. Her name, Hazel Reed, was embossed in simple, elegant silver script. Hazel stared at it. "Conrad Dalton?" "I don't know any Conrad Dalton." "You served him coffee yesterday at the Bluebird Diner," Jeffrey stated, as if reciting a file. "Corner booth, 10:32 a.m. to 12:28 p.m. He was very specific about the delivery instructions." The man from the diner. The man with the strange question. A cold knot of dread formed in her gut. This felt wrong. This felt dangerous. "What is this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Dalton's response to your request," Jeffrey said. "My instructions are to wait until you have opened it." Her hands trembled as she unlatched the chain and took the envelope. It felt heavy, substantial. She closed the door, leaving Jeffrey standing impassively in the hallway, and leaned against it. With a deep, shaky breath, she broke the wax seal on the back. Inside was not a letter, but a small, black box. She lifted the lid. Nestled on a bed of black velvet was a single card. It was matte black, made of some kind of metal, cool to the touch. It was heavier than any credit card she'd ever held. In the center, in subtle, laser-etched platinum, was a stylized D and the name Conrad Dalton. Her own name, Hazel M. Reed, was etched below it. There were no numbers on the front, no expiration date, no Visa or MasterCard logo. Just those names and that symbol. Beneath the card was a small, folded note on the same heavy stock as the envelope. The handwriting was bold and decisive. For your day off, and the ones after. C.D. This had to be a joke, a very elaborate, very cruel prank. She opened the door again. Geoffrey was still there, a human statue of professional patience. "I don't understand," she said, holding up the card. "What is this?" "It is a Dalton Reserve card," he said, his tone suggesting she should already know this. "An invitation-only line of credit. There is no preset limit." Hazel's brain short-circuited. "No. Preset limit? You mean it's a credit card?" "It is more than that," Geoffrey corrected her smoothly. "It offers access. The concierge service linked to the card can procure nearly anything. Tickets, reservations, transportation, services. Mr. Dalton has already taken care of the activation. It is ready for your use." She stared at him, then at the card, then back at him. Why? Why would he do this? I served him coffee. Mr. Dalton is a man of particular impulses, Geoffrey said, the closest he'd come to a human explanation. He was intrigued by your answer to his question. He values honesty. He considered your request for a day off and concluded that a single day was insufficient to address the systemic issues leading to your exhaustion. This is his solution. Systemic issues? He diagnosed her life in 2 hours over a cup of bad coffee? The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. "There has to be a catch," she said, her voice sharp with suspicion. "People like him don't just give things like this away. What does he want in return?" For the first time, a flicker of something, perhaps amusement, crossed Geoffrey's face. "Mr. Dalton does not engage in transactions of that nature. He wants nothing. He is merely curious to see what you will do. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have other matters to attend to." He gave a curt nod, turned, and walked away, his expensive shoes making no sound on the worn linoleum of the hallway. Hazel was left standing in her doorway, holding a piece of black metal that supposedly held infinite purchasing power. She spent the next hour in a state of fugue. She called Sal and told him she was sick, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. She couldn't face the diner. She couldn't face anything. She sat at her kitchen counter, staring at the card. It looked alien against the chipped formica, a piece of a different universe. She tried to look it up online. Dalton Reserve card. The search results were sparse, filled with hushed articles on financial blogs about a mythical, ultra-exclusive card for the world's elite. It was sometimes called the Billionaire's Key, a card that operated outside the normal financial systems. Most articles concluded it was probably just a rumor. The name, however, was not a rumor. Conrad Dalton. A quick search of that name opened a Pandora's box. He was the founder and CEO of Dalton Enterprises, a global behemoth with interests in tech, real estate, and private equity. He was a notorious recluse, rarely photographed, known for his ruthless business tactics and visionary investments. He was one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he had been sitting in her booth. Panic began to bubble in her chest. This was a game to him. She was an insect he'd decided to poke with a stick to see how it would wriggle, a social experiment. But then her eyes fell on the denial letter from the insurance company, on the pile of bills. She thought of Leo, stuck in a sterile hospital room, his body fighting a war she couldn't help him win. The doctors had been clear. The standard chemotherapy was failing. The new treatment, the experimental one, cost a fortune per dose. It was a sum so vast she couldn't even comprehend it. With a trembling hand, she found the phone number on the back of the card for the concierge service. She had to know if it was real. A voice answered on the first ring. It was calm, polished, and impossibly professional. Dalton Reserve Concierge, this is Anya. How may I assist you, Miss Reed? They knew her name. Of course they knew her name. Hazel's mouth was dry. I need to check the balance on my card. There was a soft chuckle on the other end of the line. Miss Reed, the Dalton Reserve doesn't have a balance in the traditional sense. As Mr. Dalton's personal guest, you have unlimited courtesy access. Unlimited, Hazel repeated, the word feeling foreign in her mouth. That's correct. Is there something I can arrange for you? A spa day, perhaps? A reservation at a Michelin-starred restaurant? A private jet to Paris for the weekend? The absurdity of it all hit her with the force of a physical blow. A jet to Paris. She couldn't even afford a MetroCard pass for the whole month. No, Hazel said, her voice gaining a sliver of strength. No, I need something else. I need to make a payment. To a hospital. There was a brief pause. Of course, Miss Reed. I can facilitate that immediately. I'll just need the name of the institution and the payment details. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment of truth. She read the information from Leo's latest bill, Mount Sinai Hospital, the billing department's number, the patient account number, and the outstanding balance for the proposed treatment protocol. The number was so large she had to say it twice to make sure she got it right. A number that represented an entire mountain of debt she could never hope to climb. One moment, Miss Reed, Anya said. Hazel heard the faint, rapid clicking of a keyboard. The silence stretched for an eternity. This is where it would fail. This is where they'd laugh and tell her the joke was over. All right, Miss Reed, Anya's voice returned, as calm as ever. The payment has been processed. Mount Sinai's oncology department has received full funding for Mr. Leo Reed's specified treatment protocol for the next 12 months. Their billing department will be in contact to confirm the zero balance on his account. Is there anything else I can assist you with today? Hazel couldn't speak. She sank onto one of her wobbly kitchen chairs, the phone slipping from her grasp. It was real. It was all real. The quiet man from the diner, the billionaire recluse, had just paid for a year of her brother's life-saving treatment with a casual flick of his wrist. The day off he had given her suddenly felt infinite and terrifying, because she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that nothing, absolutely nothing, is ever truly free. The price for this miracle was yet to be named, and she was sure it would be more than she could ever afford to pay. The call from the hospital came an hour later. It was Dr. Evans, Leo's oncologist, his voice a mixture of utter disbelief and unbridled excitement. Hazel, I don't know what to say. We just received confirmation from billing. An anonymous benefactor has funded Leo's entire T-cell therapy course, a full year, including all associated costs. This is unprecedented. We can start him as early as next week. Tears streamed down Hazel's face, hot and silent. They weren't tears of pure joy, but a complex cocktail of relief, gratitude, and a profound, unsettling fear. She had saved her brother, or rather, a stranger had, and she had no idea why. She spent the rest of the day in a daze. She bought groceries, not just pasta and canned sauce, but fresh vegetables, a small steak, a carton of orange juice with extra pulp, the kind Leo loved. She paid with the black card, her hand shaking as she inserted it into the chip reader. The cashier didn't bat an eye. The transaction went through instantly. It felt illicit, like she was stealing. But the fear remained a cold stone in her gut. Conrad Dalton wasn't a philanthropist known for his anonymous donations. He was a shark, a corporate raider. Men like him didn't perform miracles out of the goodness of their hearts. They made investments, and they always expected a return. The other shoe dropped 2 days later. She was just leaving Leo's hospital room, her heart lighter than it had been in years after seeing the genuine hope in his eyes for the first time when her phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello? Ms. Reed. This is Geoffrey." The crisp British voice was unmistakable. "Mr. Dalton requests the pleasure of your company. He would like to discuss a business proposition with you. A car will be waiting for you at your residence tomorrow morning at 9. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. "What kind of business proposition?" Hazel asked, her guard immediately up. "Mr. Dalton prefers to discuss such matters in person. 9 a.m., Miss Reed." The line went dead. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her newfound relief. This was it. The bill was coming due. The next morning, a black sedan, so polished it reflected the gritty facade of her apartment building in perfect distorted clarity, was waiting at the curb precisely at 9 a.m. The driver, a stoic man in a black suit, held the door open for her. The interior smelled of leather and quiet money. The windows were tinted, sealing her off from the familiar world of Queens and transporting her into another realm. They drove into Manhattan, into the heart of the financial district. The car pulled up in front of a skyscraper of smoked glass and steel that seemed to pierce the clouds. At the top, in minimalist silver letters, were the words, "Dalton Enterprises." Geoffrey was waiting for her in the lobby, a vast, echoing space of white marble and abstract art. It was as cold and imposing as he was. "Ms. Reed, this way, please." They rode a private elevator that moved with unnerving speed and silence. It opened directly into an office that was larger than her entire apartment. 3 of the walls were floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a godlike view of the city below. The Bluebird Diner would be a microscopic speck somewhere in that concrete sprawl. And standing in the center of it all, looking out at his kingdom, was Conrad Dalton. He turned as she entered. In his own environment, his power was no longer a quiet, contained thing. It was palpable, radiating from him like heat. He was wearing a perfectly tailored suit, but he'd shed the jacket, his sleeves rolled up to his forearms. He looked younger, more formidable than he had in the diner. "Ms. Reed," he said, his voice the same low baritone she remembered. "Hazel, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." He gestured to a leather chair that probably cost more than her car, if she had a car. She sat on the edge of it, her back ramrod straight. "Mr. Dalton," she began, her voice tight, "I want to thank you for what you did for my brother. There are no words to tell you what that means, but I need to know why, and what you expect in return." He walked over to a small bar and poured 2 glasses of water, handing one to her. His movements were deliberate, economical. "I expect nothing in return for your brother's medical care, Hazel," he said, his blue eyes meeting hers. "Consider that a philanthropic impulse. As Geoffrey may have told you, I was intrigued. Your file said you were a former art history major at Columbia, top of your class, before you had to withdraw." Her file? He had a file on her. The cold dread intensified. He hadn't just been observing her in the diner, he'd been researching her. "The card," he continued, taking a seat opposite her, "was an experiment. I wanted to see what a person, when given unlimited resources, would prioritize. You didn't buy a Lamborghini or a penthouse. You bought medication for your brother, and then you bought groceries. It was a refreshingly pragmatic and selfless response." "I'm not a science experiment, Mr. Dalton," she shot back, a spark of anger cutting through her fear. A faint smile touched his lips. "No, you're not. You are, however, the subject of my business proposition." He leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "I am in the final stages of acquiring the entire city block on which the Bluebird Diner sits. My architects have designed a new state-of-the-art commercial tower for that location. Demolition is scheduled to begin in 3 months." The air left Hazel's lungs. The Bluebird, Sal, Piper, the gruff cooks, the regulars, her job, the only source of income, however meager, that she'd had. "You're going to tear it down?" she whispered. "Progress requires change," he said simply. "However, I've run into a minor complication. The owner, a Mr. Salvatore Moretti, is being sentimental. He's refusing my very generous offer. He's trying to rally the other small business owners on the block to file for some kind of historical preservation status, which would delay my project for years and cost me millions." Hazel stared at him, understanding dawning like a dark, ugly sunrise. "And you want me to—" "What?" "Convince Sal to sell?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "Betray him?" "Betray is a very emotional word," Conrad said smoothly. "I prefer persuade. Sal trusts you. You've worked for him for 3 years. You understand his financial struggles better than anyone. You can explain to him that this is the best offer he will ever get. A comfortable retirement. A chance to get out from under a failing business." "It's not a failing business," she protested. "It's his life. It's my life." "It's a greasy spoon with outdated plumbing and a pre-diabetic clientele," he countered, his voice losing its patient edge and taking on a cold, clinical tone. "It is an inefficient use of prime real estate. I am offering you a choice, Hazel. Help me facilitate a smooth transition. In return, I will set up a trust fund for your brother that will cover any and all medical and living expenses for the rest of his life. I will also offer you a position within my company's foundation, the Dalton Art Initiative. A 6-figure salary. A chance to use that degree you never finished. A chance to have the life you were supposed to have." It was the ultimate temptation. Everything she had ever wanted dangled right in front of her. Not just Leo's safety, which he had already secured for a year, but for his entire life. And for her, a way out, a return to the world of art and intellect she had mourned for years. All she had to do was destroy the lives of the people who had been her surrogate family. All she had to do was convince a stubborn old man to give up his dream. "And if I refuse?" she asked, her voice trembling. Conrad leaned back in his chair, the picture of calm, indomitable power. "If you refuse, the offer is rescinded. I will, of course, find another way to acquire the property. It will be more hostile, more costly, and far more unpleasant for Mr. Moretti. As for the card you hold, the funding for Leo's treatment has been paid for 1 year. After that, you'll be on your own again." He was holding her brother's life in his hands. He had given her a miracle, only to reveal that it was a leash. "You're a monster," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. He didn't flinch. His blue eyes were as cold and clear as ice. "I'm a businessman, Hazel," he said. "I saw potential in you, an asset. Now I'm giving you the opportunity to realize that potential. The choice is yours. Loyalty to a past that is already dying, or a stake in the future. You have until Friday." He stood, the meeting clearly over. He had given her a key to a kingdom, and then revealed it was the key to a cage. She could save her brother and herself, but the price was her soul. She walked out of that magnificent office, the black card in her pocket, now feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds, the godlike view of the city mocking her. Down below, In that world of mortals, Sal was probably wiping down a counter, completely unaware that his fate was being decided 40 stories above his head by the waitress he trusted and the billionaire who saw the world as his personal chessboard. And Hazel was the pawn he had just put into play. Hazel walked out of Dalton Enterprises and into the chaotic symphony of the Manhattan streets, but she felt completely detached from it all. The city noise was a dull roar in her ears. Conrad Dalton's words echoed in her mind, a cold, calculated poison, loyalty to a past that is already dying, or a stake in the future. She didn't take a taxi. She took the subway, the rattling train, and the press of humanity, a bizarre comfort after the sterile silence of Dalton's tower. She needed the grit. She needed the reality. She felt like a traitor just for having been in that office. When she got back to the Bluebird diner, the place felt different. It was no longer just her place of work. It was a battleground. Sal was behind the counter, arguing with Piper about the new salt shakers. The regulars were in their booths. It was a snapshot of a world Dalton had already marked for demolition. "There you are," Sal grumbled as she walked in, his scowl firmly in place. "Feeling better? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Hazel mumbled, tying on her apron. The familiar motions felt foreign now. Every plate she carried, every coffee she poured, felt like a lie. She tried to work, to slip back into the routine, but she couldn't. She kept seeing the blueprint of a glass tower superimposed over the worn, checkerboard floor. She kept hearing Dalton's voice, cool and confident, signing the diner's death warrant. Later that afternoon, during a lull, she found Sal in his tiny, cluttered office, hunched over a pile of invoices. "Sal, can I talk to you for a second?" "If it's about a raise, the answer's no," he grunted without looking up. "It's not about a raise." She closed the door behind her. "It's about the offer. To buy the diner." Sal's head snapped up. His eyes, usually clouded with weariness, sharpened. "What do you know about that?" "I know the man who made it," Hazel said, the words tasting like acid. "His name is Conrad Dalton." Sal's face darkened. The shark from downtown sent his little suit and tie errand boy in here a few times. I told him to get lost. This place was my father's. It'll be here long after I'm gone. Hazel's heart ached, the conviction in his voice, the fierce pride. How could she possibly be the one to break it? "Sal, he's not going to give up," she said, her voice low. "He's not just buying the diner. He's buying the whole block, the hardware store, Mrs. Gable's bakery, all of it. He's going to tear it all down." Sal slammed his hand on the desk. "Let him try. We're a community here. We're fighting it. Got a petition, talking to the Landmarks Commission. This place has history." "He has more money than God, Sal," Hazel pleaded, hearing the echo of Dalton's cold logic in her own voice. "He has lawyers who can tie this up in court until you've bled every last penny you have. The offer he's making is blood money." Sal cut her off, his voice dangerously quiet. "And you're here defending it. What did he do, Hazel? Offer you a piece of the pie?" The accusation hit her like a slap. He had, of course. He'd offered her the whole damn bakery. Before she could answer, the office door creaked open. It was Piper, her usually cheerful face tight with suspicion. "I couldn't help but overhear. What's going on? Who is Conrad Dalton?" And so, Hazel told them. Not everything. She couldn't bring herself to mention Leo, or the black card, or the job offer. That felt like a deeper, more personal betrayal. But she told them about Dalton's unyielding plan, his immense resources, and the meeting in his tower. She presented it as a warning, a piece of inside information she'd stumbled upon. Sal listened, his face a granite mask. Piper looked from Sal to Hazel, her expression growing more and more worried. "He's going to crush us, isn't he?" Piper said softly. "No," Sal said, a fire lighting in his eyes. "No, we fight. We get the neighborhood involved. We call the papers. We make so much noise that even a ghoul like Dalton will have to listen." Over the next 2 days, the Bluebird Diner transformed. It became a war room. Sal was a general, rallying his troops. He called meetings with the other shop owners. Petitions were printed and taped to the front counter. Piper, a social media whiz, started a Save the Bluebird campaign online that began to get some local traction. Hazel was caught in the middle. She played her part, handing out flyers, smiling at supportive customers, but a part of her felt like a spy. Every night, she'd go home to her apartment, pull out the Dalton Reserve card, and just stare at it. It was her brother's future. It was her future. It was a poison pill and a golden ticket all in one. On Thursday, the day before Dalton's deadline, a new player entered the game. A man named Finian Shaw. He was the opposite of Conrad Dalton, flashy, loud, with a politician's smile that never reached his eyes. He owned a rival development firm, Shaw Properties. He strode into the diner like he owned the place and made a beeline for Sal. "Sal Moretti," he boomed, extending a hand. "Finian Shaw, I heard you were having some trouble with the big bad wolf from Dalton Enterprises. I'm here to help." Over the next hour, Shaw laid out a counter-proposal. He claimed he wanted to preserve the character of the neighborhood. He wouldn't tear everything down. He'd build around the existing storefronts, a smaller, more community-focused development. He'd make the Bluebird the centerpiece. And his offer to Sal, while less than Dalton's, was still substantial. Sal was ecstatic. It was the lifeline he'd been praying for. The other shop owners were thrilled. Here was a developer who seemed to listen. But Hazel was suspicious. There was a predatory gleam in Shaw's eyes. His promises seemed too easy, too perfect. She watched him work the room, charming Piper, clapping Sal on the back. It felt like a performance. That night, she did something reckless. Using the concierge service that came with the black card, she made a request. "Anya, I need information," she said, her voice low. "Everything you can find on a developer named Finian Shaw and his company, Shaw Properties. Specifically, his past projects and any pending legal issues." "Of course, Miss Reed," the calm voice replied. "I will have a full dossier sent to your encrypted email within the hour." The efficiency was terrifying. An hour later, her inbox pinged. The file was hundreds of pages long. It detailed a pattern of behavior that made her blood run cold. Shaw would promise communities the world, getting them to back him against larger competitors. Once he had control of the zoning and permits, his plans would change. The preserved buildings would be found to have unforeseen structural issues and would need to be demolished. He'd use legal loopholes to force out tenants. He left a trail of broken promises and bankrupt small businesses from Brooklyn to the Bronx. He wasn't a savior. He was a jackal, waiting for the lion to wound the prey before he moved in. Worse, the file contained details of his current financial state. Shaw Properties was over-leveraged, on the brink of collapse. He needed this project to secure new funding. He wasn't just being opportunistic, he was desperate. And a desperate man was a dangerous one. She now held two terrible truths. Conrad Dalton was an honest monster, a shark who told you he was going to eat you. Finian Shaw was a smiling liar, a snake who promised you safety before he struck. The next morning, Friday, the day of her deadline, she went to the diner early. She found Sal in his office, a pen in his hand, ready to sign a preliminary agreement with Shaw. "Sal, stop," she said, holding out her phone with the dossier displayed. You can't sign that. Shaw is a fraud." Sal looked at the phone, then at her, his face clouded with mistrust. "And how did you get this? More gifts from your friend Dalton?" "It doesn't matter how I got it. It's the truth," she insisted. "He's going to ruin you. He's going to ruin everyone." "Dalton is the one who wants to bulldoze my life's work," Sal roared, his face red with anger. "Shaw is offering us a chance. Maybe you're the one who's lying, Hazel. Maybe Dalton is paying you to sabotage this deal so he can get what he wants." His words cut deeper than any insult from Dalton. The accusation hung in the air, thick and ugly. Piper, standing in the doorway, looked at Hazel with eyes full of doubt. In their eyes, her mysterious knowledge made her a suspect, not a savior. Her attempt to protect them had only isolated her further. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from an unknown number. "Tick-tock, Ms. Reed. The clock is running out. Have you made your choice?" There was no signature. It didn't need one. She was trapped. If she sided with Dalton, she was a traitor. If she tried to fight both him and Shaw, she was alone, and Sal and the others would be devoured by the snake they thought was their friend. She looked at Sal's angry, stubborn face and Piper's confusion and realized that Conrad Dalton had been right about one thing. The past was already dying. It was being murdered, and she was being forced to choose the executioner. The air in Sal's office was thick with betrayal. Sal looked at her, not as his trusted employee, but as an agent of the enemy. Piper's face was a canvas of confusion and hurt. Hazel's desperate warning had backfired, painting her as a traitor. I have to go," Hazel stammered, backing out of the office. She couldn't breathe in there. She fled the diner, the familiar chime of the bell sounding like a funeral toll. Outside, the city felt oppressive. She walked for blocks, aimlessly, her mind a maelstrom of impossible choices. Dalton's deadline was hours away. Sal was about to sign away his future to a con artist. Leo's life hung in the balance. She found herself in a small park, sinking onto a bench. She pulled the black card from her wallet. This small piece of metal was the source of all her power and all her misery. It had paid for a miracle, and in doing so, had shackled her to a monster. But Dalton had called her an asset. He had said she was refreshingly pragmatic. What would a pragmatic person do? A new thought, cold and clear, cut through the panic. She had been playing their game. Dalton's game, Shaw's game. They saw her as a pawn, a tool to manipulate Sal. What if she stopped being a pawn and started being a player? She took out her phone. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the number for the Dalton Reserve concierge. "Anya, it's Hazel Reed." "Good afternoon, Miss Reed. How may I be of service?" "I need to arrange a meeting," Hazel said, her voice gaining strength. "With Conrad Dalton, as soon as possible, and I need a second meeting scheduled immediately after, with a man named Finian Shaw, and I need one other thing. I need you to find the absolute best contracts and real estate lawyer in New York City. I don't care what it costs. I need them to meet me at Dalton Enterprises in 1 hour." There was a pause on the other end of the line, the first time Anya had ever seemed surprised. "Ms. Reed, that is a highly unusual request." "Mr. Dalton said this card was for access," Hazel countered, her voice hard. "He said he was curious to see what I would do. Well, this is what I'm doing. Can you make it happen, or not?" Another brief pause. "Yes, Ms. Reed. The meetings will be arranged. A car is on its way to your location." An hour later, Hazel walked back into the lobby of Dalton Enterprises. She was not the same terrified woman who had entered 2 days before. She wore the same simple clothes, but her posture was different. Her fear had been burned away, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She was met not by Geoffrey, but by a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s named Cassandra Vance, the lawyer the concierge had procured. Miss Vance's reputation preceded her. She was known as the most formidable legal mind in Manhattan real estate. "Ms. Reed," the lawyer said with a firm handshake. "I've been briefed on the public details of the Bluebird Diner acquisition. Your concierge service was very persuasive. Let's go make a billionaire listen." They were shown directly to Conrad Dalton's office. He was there, along with Geoffrey. Dalton looked surprised to see her back so soon, and even more surprised to see she'd brought legal counsel. "Ms. Reed," Dalton said, raising an eyebrow. "And counsel, an unexpected development." "I'm here to give you my answer," Hazel said, standing her ground. Ms. Vance stood silently beside her, a pillar of legal authority. "My answer is no." Geoffrey smirked. Dalton's expression remained unreadable. "That is disappointing," he said. "You're choosing to stand by a sentimental old man and a failing diner over your brother's future and your own." "You're wrong," Hazel said. "I'm not choosing the past, and I'm not choosing your future either. I'm choosing a third option. Mine." She took a deep breath. "You want the block, Mr. Dalton. You'll get it eventually. We both know that. But Sal and his petition can delay you. A public fight, spearheaded by a plucky little diner against a heartless corporation. The media will love that story. It will be a stain on your company's image. It will cost you time and money." "A minor inconvenience," Geoffrey sniffed. "Perhaps," Hazel conceded. "But then there's Finian Shaw. He's circling. He's about to get Sal to sign an agreement that will give him control. I have a dossier here proving he's a fraudulent operator on the verge of bankruptcy. Once he has control, he'll tie up the block in legal battles and bankruptcy proceedings for years. You won't be able to build your tower. He'll lose everything, but he'll drag you down with him out of spite. You won't be dealing with a sentimental old man. You'll be dealing with a desperate, cornered rat." Dalton was silent, his blue eyes fixed on her. He was listening. He was truly listening. "So here is my proposition," Hazel continued, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. "You are going to buy this block, but you are not going to tear down the Bluebird Diner. Your architects are brilliant, I'm sure. They can redesign the ground floor of your new tower to incorporate the diner. Not a replica. The real thing. You will restore it, preserve it. It will be a feature, a nod to the city's history, a testament to the great Conrad Dalton, not just building over the past, but honoring it. Think of the PR." She pushed a piece of paper across the desk. "This is a list of my terms. Sal Moretti will be paid the full, original offer price, and he will be retained as a paid consultant for the diner's operations for life. Every single employee of the Bluebird will be guaranteed a job at the new diner with a raise. And the Dalton Art Initiative will establish a permanent fund for the preservation of small, historic businesses throughout the 5 boroughs." Dalton looked at the list, then back at her. A slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a cold, calculating smile. It was one of genuine admiration. "And what do you get out of this deal, Hazel?" he asked softly. "I was getting to that," she said. "The trust for my brother's care remains in perpetuity, managed by an independent trustee. And I will accept your job offer at the foundation. In fact, I will run the new Small Business Preservation Fund. I'll be your asset, Mr. Dalton. I'll be the human face of your corporation, the story of the waitress who saved her diner. It's a much better story than the billionaire who crushed it." There was a long silence. Geoffrey looked at his boss, aghast. Finally, Dalton began to laugh, a real, deep laugh. "Extraordinary," he said, looking at her with a new kind of respect. "Absolutely extraordinary. You didn't just play the game, Miss Reed. You flipped the entire board." He extended his hand. "You have a deal. Have your lawyer work out the details with my legal team." As Ms. Vance began to speak with Jeffrey, a new notification pinged on Dalton's phone. He glanced at it. "It seems Mr. Finian Shaw has just arrived in the lobby for his meeting with you." "I know," Hazel said. "I'm going to enjoy telling him his services are no longer required." The resolution was swift. Shaw was dismissed, his scheme dismantled before it ever began. The agreement Hazel had outlined was put into ironclad legal writing by Ms. Vance. When Hazel presented the final deal to Sal, he stared at her, speechless, tears welling in his eyes. He didn't see a traitor anymore. He saw a fighter who had accomplished the impossible. Hazel Reed's life changed. She moved out of her tiny Queens apartment. Leo began his treatment, and for the first time in years, started getting better. She walked into her new office at the Dalton Art Initiative, not as an employee, but as a leader. Her relationship with Conrad Dalton was complex. It was no longer a matter of a billionaire and a waitress, but of two formidable intellects who had found a mutual, surprising respect. The power dynamic had shifted, becoming a strange sort of partnership. She still had the Dalton Reserve card, but she rarely used it. She didn't need to. True wealth, she had learned, wasn't about having a card with no limit. It was about having the courage to write your own terms, to fight for what mattered, and to build a future without having to burn down the past. In the end, she got more than a day off. She got her life back, on her own terms. Hazel Reed's story started with a desperate, sarcastic wish for a single day of peace. It transformed into a high-stakes battle for her soul, her brother's life, and the future of her community. She was given a key to a world of unimaginable wealth, only to discover it was a test of her character. Instead of losing herself in luxury, she used that power to become a protector, flipping the chessboard on a man who thought he controlled the entire game. Her journey shows us that true strength isn't about the money you have, but the integrity you refuse to sell. It's a powerful reminder that even when you feel like a pawn in someone else's world, you have the power to change the rules. If Hazel's incredible journey from exhaustion to empowerment moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the hidden dramas that unfold in everyday life. What would you do if you were handed a black card? Let us know in the comments below.